The Alpha King's pack ignored his command, but followed the silent girl without hesitation. The kingdom of Virlia lay beneath a sky that seemed always caught between dusk and night, a perpetual twilight that made even the tallest towers cast long, trembling shadows. The forests surrounding the capital were dense and old, filled with gnarled trees whose branches whispered secrets when the wind passed through them. No ordinary wind, some said, for the forest itself was alive with spirits, some playful, others bitter and vengeful. Few dared wander its paths, and even fewer returned unshaken. It was here that the Alpha King ruled, feared and respected in equal measure. He was a man of commanding presence, whose eyes seemed to hold storms within them and whose voice could make the ground tremble. Loyalty was law in his domain, and any sign of defiance was met with swift consequences. Yet, the forest had a strange way of challenging even the strongest wills. The day the girl appeared, the Alpha King was inspecting the northern border of the kingdom, riding atop his black stallion, whose hooves drummed a steady rhythm against the cobblestones. The pack accompanied him, dozens of warriors loyal to his command, their eyes sharp and attentive, their movements fluid as water. He rode ahead, confident that his word was law. The kingdom had never seen a defiance strong enough to challenge him. And yet, something in the forest felt different. A subtle tension hummed through the trees, as if they were holding their breath. He noticed her first when one of his scouts whispered to him that a figure had appeared at the forest's edge. The girl was unlike anyone he had seen before. She was small, delicate in form, and yet there was a gravity to her presence that made him uneasy. She did not move hastily, nor did she run away. She stood silently among the shadows, her long hair catching what little light there was, flowing like dark water. Her eyes, though quiet and still, seemed to peer straight into him, reading the parts of himself even he tried to hide. The Alpha King frowned. "Leave her," he commanded, his voice carrying over the pack like a blade. "Do not engage, she is nothing to us." For a moment the pack obeyed, but then, inexplicably, they began to follow her, quietly at first, then more openly. The wolves in his command, the warriors who had sworn their loyalty, moved as though drawn by some invisible tether. The Alpha King's hand clenched the reins tighter. "Stop," he roared. "I said leave her." But no one stopped. Anger burned in him, a heat he was not used to feeling. He was the Alpha King, the ruler whose commands were absolute. And yet, here was someone who moved his pack without a word. The forest seemed to lean in closer, watching the drama unfold with a patience older than time itself. He rode forward, moving past his own warriors to confront her. The girl did not flinch. She did not speak. She only watched him, her gaze steady and unyielding. There was something in her silence that challenged him, that dared him to step closer without knowing the full measure of her power. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low, threaded with both fury and curiosity. Still she said nothing. The Alpha King's chest tightened. He had faced enemies, traitors, assassins, and monsters alike, but never someone who could make him feel both fear and fascination at the same time. The pack circled the girl protectively, their loyalty to the king challenged by a force they themselves could not explain. Some among them shifted nervously, glancing at him for guidance, but not one moved to break the silent bond that had formed. Hours passed. The king demanded answers, and the forest provided none. The girl moved slowly, almost gracefully, deeper into the trees, and the pack followed without hesitation. The king felt his control slipping, a sensation foreign and unsettling. He had never had to chase someone before, and the idea that the pack might respect someone other than him, however briefly, stirred a storm of emotions he did not wish to acknowledge. That night, the king returned to his castle, but sleep was a stranger. The girl's image haunted his thoughts, the tilt of her head, the unbroken calm in her eyes, the mystery that surrounded her like a cloak of shadow. He paced the halls, restless. The advisors tried to counsel him, spoke of dangers and curses, but their words felt empty compared to the pull he felt toward her. She was more than mortal, he sensed, though her human form betrayed nothing of the power he felt radiating from her. Meanwhile, the girl wandered through the forest, her bare feet light against the soft moss. She moved with purpose, though even she did not fully understand why. Her past was hidden, a life of quiet suffering and secrets, memories wrapped in a fog that kept her from speaking freely. And yet, she knew one thing with certainty. The Alpha King, for all his strength and authority, was drawn to her in ways neither of them could yet name. The forest seemed to guide her steps, whispering in a language she barely understood, leading her to a place she felt she must go. When dawn broke, the Alpha King rode out once again, determined to find her. The forest seemed alive with anticipation. Birds fell silent as he passed, and even the wind held its breath. He followed the path the pack had taken the night before, the sense of inevitability pressing him forward. He had to know. He had to understand why his pack, his loyal warriors, had chosen her over him, even if only for a moment. Hours passed. Sunlight barely touched the forest floor through the dense canopy, painting the world in shades of green and gold. The girl was gone. Only a symbol remained, etched into the bark of an ancient tree. It was delicate like silver threads caught in the wood, a pattern older than the kingdom itself. The king dismounted, running his fingers over the mark. It pulsed faintly under his touch, as though alive. He knew then that she was no ordinary girl. Something ancient, something powerful, lingered in her presence. A curse, perhaps, or a blessing wrapped in mystery. Either way, the Alpha King felt an unfamiliar tug at his heart, a longing he could not name, and a worry he could not shake. The pack howled in the distance, their calls echoing through the trees, and he understood. They were waiting not for him but for her. That night the king sat alone in his chambers, staring into the fire. The flickering flames reflected in his eyes, and he realized something he had never allowed himself to admit. He did not know how to command this feeling, this fascination, this fear of losing control. The girl had awakened something dormant in him, a crack in the armor of authority he had worn for years. And he feared, perhaps more than he had ever feared before, what would happen if he could not find her. Far away, hidden among the shadows of the forest, the girl watched the castle from a distance. She felt his presence like a pulse in the earth, felt the weight of his gaze searching for her. She did not move closer, nor did she retreat. She only waited, knowing that the path ahead would be filled with challenges she could not yet foresee. A bond had been formed, fragile and unspoken, and its strength terrified her. The forest sighed around her, ancient and knowing. It had seen kings rise and fall, lovers meet and part, curses begin and end. And it knew that something had begun here, something that could change the kingdom forever. In the silence between the trees, the Alpha King's pack gathered, circling where she had stood. Their loyalty was a strange, complicated thing now. They obeyed the king still, but part of them had felt the pull of the girl's presence, had glimpsed a power beyond their understanding. And in that moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The girl disappeared into the deeper woods, leaving only the symbol behind. The Alpha King stood in the clearing, hands clenched at his sides, knowing one truth: the world he ruled was no longer entirely under his control. And for the first time in his life, he did not want it to be. But the question that haunted him, the question he could not silence, remained in the air like smoke curling toward the sky. Who was she? And why had his pack followed her, ignoring his command without hesitation? The answers, he knew, would come, but not yet. The forest held its secrets close, and the girl held hers even closer. And so the kingdom waited, the twilight pressing in, the shadows stretching long across the land, and the Alpha King knew that his world, his rules, and even his heart were about to be tested in ways he could not imagine. The Alpha King had never felt uncertainty like this before. Days had passed since the girl vanished into the depths of the forest, yet her presence clung to his thoughts as tightly as the shadows clung to the trees. He could not focus on his duties, could not bring himself to sit at the council table or speak with his advisors without imagining her silent face. She had stirred something in him, something long buried under years of rule, command, and solitude. The thought that she could disappear entirely without a trace filled him with a mixture of frustration and longing he could not name. One morning, he made a decision that startled even himself. He would venture into the forest alone. The pack waited at the edges, obedient yet restless, as though they too felt the pull of the girl. But he wanted to see her for himself, to understand the strange power she seemed to hold over the loyalty he had always commanded. Mounting his black stallion, he pushed past the familiar paths and into the tangled heart of the forest. The air was thick, filled with the scent of moss and the faint echo of whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. The forest changed as he moved deeper. Sunlight fell in scattered beams, painting the ground in patches of gold and green. Trees twisted into shapes that reminded him of creatures from old stories, their bark gnarled and writhing as if alive. Birds sang in strange melodies, and for a moment the king wondered if the forest itself was testing him. Every step he took seemed to pull him further from the world he knew, deeper into a place where magic and reality intertwined. Hours passed. The king's arms ached from holding the reins, and his legs were stiff from riding, but he did not stop. Something stronger than curiosity drove him forward, a need to find her, to understand her, to see the reason why his pack had followed her without hesitation. It was not obedience, it was something else entirely, something magnetic, something dangerous. Then he saw her. She was standing near a small stream, her reflection trembling on the water's surface. She had not noticed him yet, and he took a moment to study her. She seemed smaller than before, but more certain, more grounded. Her eyes, when they met his, held a quiet strength that both challenged and invited him. The forest around them seemed to hush, as if watching, waiting for what would happen next. The Alpha King dismounted, keeping his voice low. "Why are you here?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. She did not speak. Only her eyes held his, steady and unwavering. In that moment he realized that her silence was not weakness. It was a shield, yes, but also a language of its own. Her stillness carried meaning, and he could feel it tugging at his heart in ways words never could. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wild animal. "You have power," he said finally. "Something I cannot control, something I do not understand." Her lips moved, but no sound came. Instead, she extended her hand slightly toward the stream. The water responded, rising in gentle arcs, twisting into shapes that reflected her emotions. The Alpha King's eyes widened. Magic, real and ancient, flowed through her. Not the kind of magic of simple spells or tricks, but something older, something deep, something that seemed to connect to the land itself. He took a step back. Fear, for the first time in years, crept into his chest. Not fear of losing his kingdom, not fear of battle, but fear of what she represented. The forest seemed to lean closer, its shadows reaching toward them. And yet, fascination held him in place. He could not look away, even if he wanted to. The girl turned and began to walk deeper into the woods. The king's instincts roared at him to follow, but he paused. She was testing him, he realized. Perhaps even testing his pack. He called them forward, and they emerged from the trees, silent and watchful, circling the girl without threatening her. She stopped and looked back, a faint smile touching her lips, and the king felt a pang he could not explain. For hours they walked like this, her leading, him following, the pack moving between them. He saw visions in the shadows, memories he had long tried to bury, images of his past mistakes, betrayals, and moments of weakness. The girl's presence seemed to draw them out, forcing him to confront the parts of himself he had hidden even from his own mind. The forest was not just guiding them, It was revealing truths he had refused to see. At one point, they reached a clearing where the sunlight broke through the canopy in golden columns. The girl paused, turning to face him. "You are not ready," she finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Not yet. You must understand yourself before you can understand me." Her words struck him like a blade. He had always known power, always commanded it, but he had never known patience. He had never known restraint. The girl was forcing him to learn both. And for the first time, he realized that his authority, his strength, even his loyalty were not enough. Something more was needed, something that had nothing to do with force or fear. He wanted to speak, to ask her to stay, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he watched as she moved again, her steps light and precise, her movements almost like a dance with the shadows. He felt the pack shift with her, their devotion divided yet united by this mysterious bond. The king's mind wandered to the kingdom he ruled. He thought of the people waiting for his decisions, of the laws he enforced, of the power he wielded. And yet, none of that mattered here. Here, in this forest, the rules were different. Here, the girl was the center, the force that shaped the world around them. He felt both fear and awe, a strange mixture that he could neither resist nor fully understand. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet, they reached a small pond. The water was still and dark, reflecting the fading light. The girl stopped and knelt at the edge, dipping her fingers into the water. The surface rippled, and he saw visions of the past, memories not his own, moments of sorrow, betrayal, and courage. He realized then that she carried more than magic. She carried history, pain, and the weight of secrets older than the kingdom itself. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her. "Why do they follow you?" he asked quietly, gesturing toward his pack who had formed a protective circle around them. She met his gaze, her eyes steady. "Because they see what you cannot," she said, "and because loyalty is not just about command. It is about belief, trust, and sometimes hope." Her words struck him deeply. He had commanded, controlled, and ruled, yet he had never considered that the hearts of his people, and his pack, might seek something more than obedience. For the first time, he understood the fragility of authority, the delicate balance between fear and respect. And in that understanding, a new kind of respect, even admiration, began to grow for the silent girl who challenged everything he thought he knew. The evening grew darker. Shadows lengthened and twisted, and the forest seemed to whisper warnings. The girl stood suddenly, a flicker of unease crossing her face. The Alpha King's senses sharpened. Something in the forest had shifted. The wind carried a low, mournful sound, and he realized they were not alone. Creatures of shadow, formed from the forest itself, began to emerge from the trees. They were not fully solid, not fully ghost, yet their presence was threatening. The pack tensed, growling in low, synchronized hums. The girl raised her hands and the shadows hesitated as if sensing her power. She had not spoken, yet her authority over the forest and its spirits was clear. The Alpha King moved instinctively, positioning himself between the girl and the approaching danger. He had faced monsters before, but this was different. These creatures were born from magic older than any crown, from anger older than any law. Yet the girl did not run. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on the shadows, her calm unbroken. He realized then that she was not just mysterious or powerful. She was brave, strong in a way he had never seen, even in the fiercest warriors of his pack. And in that realization, he felt something stir deep inside him, a connection, a need, a desire to protect, to trust, and to understand. The shadows retreated, melting back into the trees as the girl lowered her hands. The forest was quiet again, yet the tension remained heavy and alive. The Alpha King looked at her, and for the first time he did not see a challenge. He saw a companion, a force of nature, a mirror to his own inner turmoil. As night fell, he knew he could not return to the castle. Not yet. The forest had become their world, a place where lessons were learned, truths revealed, and bonds tested. And he understood something he had never admitted. He was drawn to her, not just as a king to a subject, but as a man to another being who could see him in ways no one else ever could. The girl disappeared once more into the forest shadows, leaving the king and the pack to follow as best they could. The forest closed around them, dark and mysterious, but alive with a sense of purpose. And in the Alpha King's heart, a seed of understanding had been planted. That power was not just control, that loyalty was not just obedience, and that sometimes the strongest bonds were the ones forged in silence, trust, and shared trials. He did not know where the path would lead, nor what dangers awaited, but one thing was certain: the girl had changed everything. And he would follow, no matter the cost, until he understood the full measure of her power and the truth of the connection that had drawn them together. And as the pack moved silently through the forest, following the girl without hesitation, the Alpha King understood that this journey was only beginning. The forest whispered around them, full of secrets and shadows. And somewhere deep in its heart, the girl waited, knowing that the challenges ahead would test both of them, and that the answers they sought would require courage, patience, and a willingness to face the truths they had long ignored. The king's heart was restless, his mind full of questions, and his soul stirred in ways he had never imagined. And as the night deepened, the forest seemed to promise that the most difficult trials and the deepest revelations were still to come. The forest grew darker with each step they took, yet the Alpha King felt a strange pull forward, deeper into its heart. The girl led the way, her movements deliberate and sure, as though the shadows themselves bent to her will. The pack moved around them, silent and watchful, their loyalty now divided between their alpha and the mysterious girl who seemed to command their attention without effort. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind seemed to carry a warning. Danger was near, yet the king could not turn back. They came to the ruins of an ancient temple, hidden deep among jagged rocks and twisted trees. Moonlight spilled through cracks in the broken roof, casting long, silver beams across the moss-covered stone. The carvings on the walls told stories of forgotten gods and tragic heroes, lovers who had been separated by betrayal, kings who had fallen to their own ambition, and women whose strength had changed the fate of entire kingdoms. The Alpha King felt a chill as he walked among these echoes of the past, sensing that the place itself was alive with memory and magic. The girl paused at the entrance, her hands resting lightly on the cold stone. "Here," she said softly. Her voice, though quiet, carried weight. "This is where you must see, where the truth will come to light." He studied her, trying to read her expression. There was courage there, yes, but also a hint of fear, a shadow of something unspoken. He realized that she was not fearless. She simply faced danger on her own terms. "What will I see?" he asked. Her eyes met his. "Your past," she said, "and the choices you have made." The king felt a tension coil within him. He had faced enemies, traitors, and beasts, yet nothing had prepared him for this. He followed her inside, the pack circling protectively as they stepped over broken tiles and scattered stones. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of something ancient, like the memory of fire long extinguished. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls, moving as if alive. Then he saw them, visions, not fully real but not illusions either. Shadows of his past flickered across the temple walls. Moments when he had been cruel in the name of order, times when fear had guided his choices instead of wisdom, and decisions that had hurt those who had trusted him most. The girl's power seemed to draw these memories out, showing him what he had long tried to hide, even from himself. He clenched his fists. "Why show me this?" he demanded, his voice low and tense. "What purpose does it serve?" "Because you cannot lead until you understand," she said. "Because power without awareness is a cage and you have lived in one your whole life." Her words struck him, though he did not show it. He had ruled with strength, yes, but he had never thought about the cost of that strength, not fully. He realized, with an ache he had never felt before, that his authority had often been built on fear, that his commands had been obeyed because the pack and his people had no choice. Yet here in this temple he saw the truth. Loyalty was fragile, respect had to be earned, and love, even in the quietest, most patient forms, was stronger than any crown. The girl reached out her hand and the visions shifted. Now he saw the pack, their eyes reflecting uncertainty and longing, their loyalty torn between command and something they sensed but could not name. He realized they had followed her not because they wanted to defy him, but because they felt her strength, her courage, and her connection to the world in ways he had never understood. The Alpha King's chest tightened. He had always been certain of his power, but certainty was gone now, replaced by something unfamiliar. Doubt, yes, but also a growing admiration for the girl who had changed everything. Suddenly, the temple trembled. Stones shifted, dust falling in clouds around them. A cold wind swept through the broken corridors, carrying a low, echoing hum that seemed to vibrate within his chest. The girl stepped forward, raising her hands. Shadows emerged from the cracks and corners of the temple, twisting into forms that were neither fully human nor beast, yet both at once. They moved with a purpose, circling the group like predators sizing up prey. The Alpha King drew his sword, the steel catching the moonlight in a flash. The pack moved into position, growling low and steady. Yet the girl did not move to attack. Instead, she stood calmly, her gaze unwavering, her power radiating outward. The shadows paused, hesitant in her presence. "You see now," she said quietly, "that strength is not always in the sword or in command. Sometimes it is in understanding, in courage, in the choices you make when no one else is watching." He realized the truth in her words. He had been strong in body, fearless in battle, unshakable in rule. But he had never faced this kind of power, this kind of courage. His own heart, his own fears had been exposed by the girl's presence. The shadows attacked suddenly, their forms darting like smoke and flame. The Alpha King moved instinctively, swinging his sword, protecting the girl and the pack. They fought as one, the warriors and the magical girl, blending skill and instinct in a dance of danger and trust. He noticed how she moved, graceful, precise, commanding even the shadows with subtle gestures, and he felt a pang of awe. Her silence had power, yes, but her action, her bravery, her calm presence, it was even stronger. Hours passed in a blur of movement, magic, and steel. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the sky, the shadows were gone, retreating back into the cracks of the temple, leaving only silence and the scent of damp stone. The pack circled the girl, protective and loyal, yet looking at him with a new understanding, as if waiting to see what he would do next. The Alpha King lowered his sword, breathing heavily. His heart raced, not from fear but from realization. He had witnessed power unlike any he had known, courage that did not rely on brute strength, and loyalty that was born from trust rather than command. He turned to the girl, who now looked at him with something unspoken in her eyes. A question, a challenge, an invitation. He began, but words failed him. For once, authority and command were meaningless. What mattered was trust, connection, and the choices he would make next. The girl stepped closer, and for the first time she smiled fully, though still quietly. It was a small gesture, yet it carried warmth, strength, and the promise of understanding. "You are learning," she said, "but there is more to see, more to face." He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility not just for his kingdom, but for himself, the pack, and this girl who had awakened something inside him he did not yet fully understand. He realized that to protect her, to follow her, and to lead the pack effectively, he would have to face truths he had long avoided. His fear of weakness, his desire for control, and his capacity for love and trust. As they prepared to leave the temple, the girl paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning the forest beyond. "There is a path ahead," she said, "a path of choices and trials. If you follow, you will not be the same." The king felt a thrill mixed with dread. He knew she spoke the truth. His world, his crown, and even his heart were about to be tested in ways he could not yet imagine. And yet, he did not hesitate. He mounted his horse, signaling for the pack to follow, and together they stepped into the deeper forest, where shadows were longer, whispers were louder, and the air itself seemed charged with magic. The girl moved ahead, calm and unwavering, and the king realized that he was no longer following out of command or obligation. He was following because he chose to, because he wanted to, because he sensed that the journey ahead was not just about power or loyalty, but about transformation, understanding, and connection. As the forest swallowed them deeper into its heart, the Alpha King felt the weight of the past lift slightly, replaced by a sense of possibility he had never known. The girl's silent strength had become a guide, and the pack's divided loyalty had become a bridge. Together they moved forward, unaware of the challenges yet to come, but certain that the world they knew was changing forever. And somewhere deeper in the forest, unseen eyes watched, sensing the power of the bond forming between the king, the girl, and the pack. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, whispering secrets that promised both danger and revelation. The Alpha King knew, as he rode alongside the girl, that the trials ahead would demand more than skill or strength. They would demand courage, trust, and the willingness to face the truth of one's own heart. The journey had only begun, and the forest waited, ancient and patient, for the next step. The kingdom of Vyrlia shivered under a twilight that had grown darker than usual. The sun's light barely reached the highest towers of the castle, and even the streets seemed draped in shadows. The Alpha King felt the change before he saw it, a tension in the air, the kind that whispered of magic, danger, and destiny. The forest beyond the city had grown restless, its edges alive with unseen movements, as though it were preparing for something long delayed. He rode with the girl at his side, the pack moving silently around them. Their journey had led them deeper than ever, past lands no human had walked for centuries. Every step had tested them. Visions of the past, creatures born of shadow, and the fragile thread of trust between them had been stretched to its limits. Yet now, as the first hint of night crept across the sky, he felt that the ultimate test was near. They reached a plateau overlooking the kingdom, where the wind carried an eerie chill and the ground trembled slightly under their feet. Here, the curse she had warned of long ago waited, an invisible weight pressing against the air. The girl stepped forward, calm and composed, but the king could see the strain in her eyes. He had followed her faithfully, fought beside her, and witnessed her strength, but even she was not invincible. "The kingdom," he began, his voice low, "is in danger. How do we stop this?" She looked at him, her eyes steady. "We do not fight the curse with force," she said. "We face it with understanding, with sacrifice, and with trust." The Alpha King felt the gravity of her words. He had relied on strength all his life, on command and loyalty, but this was different. This was not a battle of swords or armies. This was a trial of heart, spirit, and unity. He realized that he would need to let go of control, to trust both the girl and the pack, and to embrace a path he had never walked before. Darkness shifted around them, swirling into shapes of shadow that rose from the ground like living smoke. The wind carried whispers, voices that seemed to echo the regrets and fears of generations past. The girl raised her hands and the shadows hesitated, bending slightly away from her light. Yet she did not step forward to attack. Instead, she turned to the king, silently urging him to trust her, to step into the challenge together. The pack formed a protective circle around them, growling low but restrained, their eyes flicking between the Alpha King and the girl. For the first time, he understood what the girl had meant when she spoke of trust. His authority alone would not hold them. They needed purpose, unity, and hope. and he needed to let go of the fear that had always driven him. The shadows surged forward, and the forest seemed to roar around them. The girl spoke a word he did not understand, soft but commanding, and the shadows wavered. The king stepped closer, standing beside her, his sword drawn. He felt the tension in the pack, the readiness to fight, yet he knew that their strength alone would not defeat this. It was the bond between them, the connection of courage, trust, and shared purpose, that gave them power. As the shadows pressed closer, the girl moved gracefully among them, her hands painting shapes in the air, guiding the spirits of the forest with precision. The king followed, swinging his sword where needed, but also observing, learning, trusting her instincts. For the first time, he realized that leadership was not about domination. It was about understanding, guiding, and sharing strength. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of motion. The shadows rose and fell, testing them, probing their fears, their weaknesses, their regrets. But the Alpha King and the girl moved as one, their steps synchronized, their trust unspoken but complete. The pack matched them perfectly, circling protectively and striking when necessary. Together, they formed a force that was neither fully human nor fully magical, but something stronger, a union of courage, loyalty, and heart. At the height of the struggle, the girl faltered slightly, and the Alpha King saw a flicker of fear cross her face. He stepped forward instinctively, catching her hand. Their eyes met, and he understood that her strength was not infinite, that she relied on him as much as he relied on her. He felt a surge of emotion he had never known, a desire to protect, to trust, and to connect with someone who had changed him completely. "Trust me," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady, "and do not fight alone." He nodded, understanding fully. For the first time in his life, he surrendered control, not to fear, not to pride, but to trust, to hope, and to the bond they shared. Together, they advanced into the heart of the shadows. The darkness resisted, lashing out with every fear he had ever known, every doubt, every regret. Yet they moved forward, hand in hand, pack around them, hearts aligned in purpose. A brilliant silver light erupted from the girl's hands, stretching into the night sky, and the shadows recoiled, their forms melting into mist. The Alpha King stepped closer, his sword raised, but he no longer felt the need to strike. The light was not his power, it was hers, yet he was part of it, and together they became unstoppable. The forest trembled as the curse's final form revealed itself, a shape that was both beautiful and terrible, reflecting the pain and longing of the kingdom's forgotten history. The girl and the king stood together, their eyes locked, and in that moment the Alpha King understood what must be done. He had to surrender fully to trust, to hope, and to love. The girl spoke softly, guiding the light toward the darkness, weaving shapes in the air with precise movements. The king followed her example, not with his sword but with his heart, aligning his will with hers, letting go of control and embracing unity. The pack moved in perfect synchronization, their loyalty no longer tested, their hearts full of trust and courage. The darkness shivered, twisted, and finally shattered, retreating into the night. The curse, ancient and relentless, was broken, not by strength or command, but by trust, courage, and connection. The forest fell silent, and the air seemed lighter, filled with the scent of earth and new beginnings. The girl turned to the Alpha King, her eyes shining in the silver light. "It is done," she said softly. "The kingdom is safe." The king exhaled, a mixture of relief, awe, and something deeper he could not name. He looked at the girl, truly looked at her, and saw not just a figure of mystery or power, but a companion, a guide, and perhaps something more. The journey had changed him, opened his heart in ways he had never imagined, and taught him that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The pack howled in unison, a sound of victory and unity. The Alpha King smiled faintly, realizing that he no longer needed to command with fear, for trust and loyalty had been earned in a far deeper way. The girl's silent strength had become a bridge between them all, and he knew that their bond, forged through trials and trust, would endure beyond the night. As the first light of dawn touched the kingdom, the Alpha King and the girl stood together, the forest stretching around them, quiet but alive. He knew challenges would come again, for the world was never truly without danger. But he also knew that they were ready together to face whatever came, their hearts and spirits aligned. The girl finally spoke more fully, her voice carrying a warmth that filled the clearing. "You are no longer the king who commands through fear," she said. "You are the leader who inspires through understanding." He nodded, the weight of years of rigid rule and solitary strength lifting from his shoulders. He realized finally that the journey had been about more than the kingdom or the curse. It had been about his own transformation, about learning to see, to trust, and to love. The pack gathered around them, loyal and steady, their eyes reflecting admiration and trust. They had followed her without hesitation, and now they followed him with renewed respect, not because of command, but because of understanding and shared purpose. Together they walked back toward the kingdom, the forest fading behind them, the sun rising to cast a new light on Virlia. The Alpha King felt a deep sense of peace, a connection to the girl and to his pack that went beyond words or authority. He understood in that moment that leadership, love, and loyalty were intertwined, and that the greatest power was the courage to face one's heart and embrace it fully. As they approached the castle gates, the people of Virlia looked on in awe. They had felt the shift, sensed the change in their king. No longer was he a ruler who commanded through fear. He was a man transformed, a leader tempered by trials, and a heart open to trust and understanding. The girl walked beside him, silent once more but radiating strength, and the Alpha King knew that their journey together was far from over. There would be trials, decisions, and challenges ahead, but for the first time he faced them not alone, not with fear but with trust, courage, and the bond of shared purpose. And in that quiet, powerful moment, the kingdom seemed to breathe with them, alive with hope, strength, and the promise of a future shaped not by command, but by unity, understanding, and the courage to embrace change. The twilight lifted, leaving a world bright with possibility, and the Alpha King understood something he had never known, that the heart, when guided by trust and love, held the truest power of all.